Did you know that while horns and antlers serve similar purposes, things like predator defense and foraging assistance, right, moving snow out of the way, and obviously in male-male competition for mates, that they are fundamentally different structures from bottom to top? Check this out. So horns are found in animals like cattle, sheep, and goats. Antelope have horns, and in all but one species, horns are permanent, meaning they're worn by the individual throughout their life. The one species that sheds its horn each year is the pronghorn antelope of North America, which is just a weird animal. It's not even an antelope. Anyway, we can talk about pronghorn more if you'd like. But horns are made from the same material as our fingernails and our hair. They're made from keratin, and they are oftentimes worn by both sexes, whereas antlers, like we're going to talk about in a second, are typically just found in males of the deer species. So the basic structure of a horn consists of the keratinized outer sheath, so the horn itself that we see, which is over a bone. So there's actually a long, what's called the frontal bone, which literally extends from the skull. It's part of the skull, extends up into the horn in horned species. Then within that frontal bone and within the skull around it, you have what's called the frontal sinus. And a sinus is simply an area within the skull that is filled with air, usually air. And the thought here is that the frontal sinus in these horned species evolved to help cushion the blows of like male-male competition when like bighorn sheep or two big bulls are just ramming each other in competing for females, access to females. And here's an image of a pronghorn antelope and its skull, and it just gives you a really nice view of that frontal bone, right? That shaft of bone that extends up into the horn. Very different than what we're going to see when we look at antlers. So antlers are only found in the deer family, the Cervidae, and in all but one species, they're only grown by males to compete with each other for access to females. The one species where females grow antlers as well as males are the caribou. So in contrast to horns, antlers, like those worn by this beautiful bull caribou, are made of bone. And they are not permanent. They are grown and dropped, literally dropped off the animal's head every year and then regrown the next year in preparation for the mating season. Because in deer, the primary function of the antlers is as weapons in male-male competition for access to mates, like these two bull elk here having a fight. Because in addition to being made of bone as opposed to keratin like horns, antlers also aren't anchored to the skull by that frontal bone extending up into them. Instead, antlers, believe it or not, as much stress and strain as these weapons take when males are fighting during the mating season for females, they just sit on this little stand, which inserts into a little depression on the skull called the pedicle and is quite literally anchored in place there throughout the entire mating season. So you can only imagine how much force the tendons and connective tissues between this and the skull that it's attached to must take. That's impressive, and actually something that I just realized I want to know more about. But my point is simply that we're contrasting horns and antlers. Notice there is no way you could insert, a frontal bone into this antler. It's meant to just sit on top of the skull and fall off at the end of the mating season when it's no longer needed. So let's sum up. Horns are fairly widespread among large herbivores, from bison to antelope to sheep and goats. They are made of keratin and they are permanent. They also tend to be worn by both sexes in horned species, whereas antlers are reserved only to the Cervidae. They're only grown in the cervids, the deer family. They are made of bone. They are not permanent. They're grown and dropped every single year. And in all but one species, the caribou, they're only grown by males to use in battle for access to females. So I hope that helps. Horns versus antlers.